much, Dave. Thank you very much, everybody. Nice to see you all. I'm going to disappoint a few of you in the audience because I'm not going to talk about the Roman coinage toolkit. Oh my goodness, sorry. We can talk about that later. More of you will probably breathe a great sigh of relief because I talk a lot about the Roman coinage toolkit. So it's nice to be able to talk about something else. And I'm here to talk to you in this session, which is about alternative perspectives from the perspective of the field archaeologist, and particularly from the point of view of research and what it's like being a researcher. So I am a field archaeologist and a find specialist, but my excavations, my field archaeology is not commercial. I tend to organize and run research, training and community excavations at Killeen, for example, Water Newton, and most recently at Hinton St Mary. But of course, like every archaeologist in the UK, we are covered and we want to do the best that we possibly can. And we are covered by similar kinds of things. So in preparation for this talk today, can you see me okay on this screen? Good. I dived into CIfA's website and also Historic England's website to get a sense for myself and also for you of the scale of the standards, guidance and toolkits mountain, something in front of us. And this is what you see on CIfA's website. It's divided into standards and guidance, working practices and advocacy, which are all interconnected, of course, in many ways. And if you click on standards and guidance, these are CIfA's current standards and guidance, and these are the order that they are arranged in and presented to us, the archaeological community. I haven't read all of these, I have to admit, and I've highlighted those in red that might be relevant for those of us who are in the finds group, for example. Other archaeologists will need to look at others, and I think actually the archives group, probably all of these are relevant to you in one way or another. So these are the standards and guidance, and just to refer to one of the talks earlier on, I thought that I think it might be the first or second slide in Jen's presentation was really, really useful for actually explaining to us what standards and guidance are for, how they're supposed to work, and how they're supposed to fit in together. Because at the moment, CIfA's website doesn't have that kind of explanation. And you and I need to work out how these different documents and how these different things interrelate and how they're supposed to operate together. So standards are the must, guidance are the perhaps why or how to, and then below those are the toolkits. I have read all of these, mainly because I produced one of them, the Roman coinage one, and these are the support, these are the toolkits that provide the resources to allow us to fulfill our obligations, which are particularly as CIfA members or as ROs that we sign up to. These provide the resources that mean we can fulfill the highest standards and therefore our obligations as ethical and professional archaeologists. And then you can go on to Historic England's website, and there are a whole series of other web pages there where different technical guidance documents are provided, grouped helpfully in some ways, according to the sector that you're particularly interested in, but that also makes them a little bit disparate, and it's very hard to get a sense of what there is overall. So the picture so far, and it's good that there is a review that is going on at the moment, the picture so far is of a highly comprehensive and extensive set of guidance and standards documents with supporting toolkits that cover all sorts of different fields. As a field archaeologist and as a finds archaeologist, that produces some difficulties because there's an awful lot to get your head around. Not all of us work for very large archaeological organizations. There are a lot of archaeologists in the country today that work independently or perhaps locally or work as part of community groups and that kind of thing. So for them to become familiar and competent with all of this is a significant undertaking, both in terms of time and intellectual power, and also then in terms of money. And what I was interested in doing is taking this as my starting point and then seeing if we might, as I set out in my talk's title, see if this provision so far has been working in order to allow us to achieve the highest ethical and professional standards. And there are different ways that we might do that. We could look at archaeology from different lenses, through different lenses. The one I'd like to look at today is research. Fundamentally, as Becky mentioned in her talk previously to mine, one of the reasons why we do what we do is because we want to recover information about past societies and about people that lived in them for all sorts of very, very good reasons. Maybe the fundamental one is that we don't know who we are until we know where we've come from, and communities often benefit from a better understanding of the past. So I'm going to present 2 or 3 research projects that illustrate some of the issues that researchers might, or at least I do in my case, might have encountered. This is Killeen, the excavations at Priory Field that I undertook together with Andy Gardner at UCL 10, 12 years ago now. That is coming up for, we hope, for publication later on this year. We excavated the front range of a store building. You can see it on the left-hand side of the slide. We recovered an enormous amount of finds material, as you can probably imagine, from a Roman legionary fortress, 2,877 registered artifacts, as well as the bulk finds and other things too, which Andy and I wanted to interrogate in order to better understand the site. So we were able to do that using our team of find specialists who produce the catalogues. And we then moved forward to the analysis stage and started looking at the distribution of those objects, both vertically and horizontally. And I won't give anything away, but what we found is quite extraordinary. And they tell us a really important story, not just about the store building or about Killeen, but about the Roman period in Britain. And one of the things that we tried to do right from the very beginning was allocate to different categories all of these 2,500 finds. And we used Nina Crummey's Nina Crummey's system of categories, which we adopted slightly and adapted slightly based on Hilary Coole's work and others as well, in which each object is allocated to, it's a coin, then its currency, is it a military find, is it a personal find, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you're a Romanist, and I'm sorry, this is a Roman perspective because that's what I am, then you may well probably be quite familiar with that. And what the next stage then is to say, okay, we have this picture, as you can see from the pie chart, we had a lot of coins, we had a lot of military items, we had a lot of fastenings and things from household items. How does that compare to other sites in Killeen? And that's where you hit the brick wall. Because in order to answer that question is at least a PhD's amount of work, because very few, we're talking about excavations that go back 150, 160 years, of course, in that site, but even recent excavations don't identify small finds, registered artifacts in the same way, nor do they categorize them in the same way too. So we were unable, unfortunately, for 95% of our finds assemblages to undertake the kind of inter-site or intra-site comparisons that would allow us to maximize the potential of our analysis. The only category of artifacts that we could do that with, lo and behold, were coins. And that's not because I wrote the coin toolkit, but it's because Nick Wells and I, 17 years ago, spent an awfully 3 years adding up every single Roman coin from Roman Wales and publishing them. They're available on the ADS website, and that included 19 other sites from Killeen. So we were able, with the coins, to compare our excavations assemblage with assemblages from elsewhere. But it goes to show what can be done, I think, and then also the problems when things can't be done. Another project I'm working on at the moment is also related to the Roman period. It's called Feeding the Roman Army in Britain. And here what we're about is we are sampling, we're using stable isotopes in order to look at the origins of animals that were reared and consumed within Roman military sites in 3 regional study areas: Southeast Wales, Hadrian's Wall, and the Antonine Wall. We are very specific in what we need. We need to look at the back 2 or 3 molars of cows, pigs, goats, and sheep. We're only looking at the 3 main domesticates. We have to look at those teeth only because the techniques don't work on other bones. We want to look at phased material that primarily comes from Hadrianic or Antonine occupation phases on sites. And we carried out a pilot study that showed a number of forts and fortresses in those 3 study areas where we should be able to locate the necessary sample items for sampling. And so the four of us involved in the project set off and went to museums in South Wales along Hadrian's Wall and the Antonine Wall. And we had lists of things that we wanted to see. And in 50% of the cases, and it's not just small museums, but it's also regional museums and also national museums, we were unable to locate the teeth from animals that we knew had been recovered because the archives told us that they were there. But for some reason, standing in those museums, in the archives, we were unable to locate either, thank you, either the boxes or the bags or anything else. And on occasion, it was very strange. There seemed to be very little standardization of archives within each of the study areas, let alone across the United Kingdom. And in some cases, individuals appear to have gone into the boxes and rearranged things. So on one very famous case on Hadrian's Wall, the zoo archaeologist, I think it was, had taken all of the bones out of their boxes and bags and piled them into a heap, then divided them by species, then divided them by skeletal items, so that if you're interested in the rib bones of pigs, you can go and find rib bones in pigs. And what they'd then done was, in order to make my job impossible 50 years down the line, they had Tipexed over the site code and the context number and written on top of that the museum accession code instead, which was always the same. So there were 57 boxes from that site. It's housesteads on Hadrian's Wall that are still being stored, that are of very little use to either me or to anybody else. And unfortunately, housesteads is one of those sites where we won't be able to we won't be able to carry out the kind of research that we want. The third site is a local site to here. It's a fairly bog standard Romano-British rural settlement that I'm involved with the post-excavation phase with. And we are trying with the find specialists to make sure that we do the usual things, which is to look at the distribution of finds within that site and compare it to other sites regionally. The difficulty that we're having with this particular site, and nobody involved is in this room, I'm pleased to say, but they might be on the screen behind me, is that there is an unawareness, if that's a proper word, I don't even know if that is a word, there is an unawareness among some find specialists of the range of standards, guidance and toolkits that are available. And there is also, and I was surprised, there is a reluctance on the part of some very experienced find specialists to actually engage with the standards, guidance and toolkits that are available to them. And I've tried to explore why there is this general reluctance or perhaps a lack of enthusiasm for them. And there's a mixture of results that come back. Not all of them are repeatable, but generally it's about complication. Generally, it's about fragmentation. Generally, it's about life's too short for all this kind of bleep. And also there is sometimes there's a reluctance there is a sense, I think, among the finds community that some of these things are imposed without having been fully consulted. Now, that is anecdotal, and I repeat that here, not as a point of view that I share, but it's something I think worth bearing in mind, particularly when we're thinking about reviewing the entire standards, guidance and toolkits armory that are available to us. The three projects I've talked about are all ongoing. And if I've learned something, I've relearned many important things. These are perhaps the three lessons that I've learned or relearned about archaeological research, and the importance, of course, we all know the importance of data, whether physical or whether digital or whatever it might be. We cannot perform our roles as archaeologists without producing data, and that data needs to be consistent, it needs to be reliable, and it needs to be standardized. The questions that I ask at the end of this paper, which relate to the title page, are all of those statements, if we turn them into questions, are the finds data currently standardized and consistent? Are archaeological finds data currently widely available in useful forms, et cetera, and I would suggest that, well, no, I don't suggest. My own experience is that the answers to those questions would tend differently, but towards the negative. It's not no, but maybe these things aren't working quite as well as they should be, and maybe we need to be thinking about how to make them work a lot better, which is why I'm so pleased that Jen is leading the review. And if I could have a sort of, these are observations, these aren't recommendations, that's not the purpose of this talk. These are my observations, how to make my life and other field archaeologists, researchers, and find specialists' lives a little bit easier. It would be handy if everything was available in one place. I don't have to go to CIfA. By the way, when I looked at all the standards and guidance I showed you, those are England. They don't include anything to do with Wales or Northern Ireland or Scotland or the regions within each of those nations. So it might be easier, wouldn't it, to have a one-stop shop where you could go and you know that everything that is relevant is available there. Training is key. That is a big mistake in the Roman coinage toolkit that we developed, and it's a collective forgetfulness. We should have inbuilt some training right at the very beginning, and we didn't. And training needs to be made available throughout the year, perhaps at CIfA conference at Easter, but other times too. The architecture, how these things fit together, could be perhaps simplified, made more comprehensible, maybe doesn't have to be comprehensive, and we need to think about the terminologies that we use, standards, guidance, and toolkit, and be very clear, as Jen's slide was, about what each one of those things does and how they fit together. It's always good to have regular reviews about how these things are working, particularly with external consultations. That might overcome some of these issues about these things being imposed on us, so we don't really want to do it. We're going to resist. And for me, having produced the Roman Coinage Toolkit, I think the FAIR guidelines, the FAIR principles, findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reuse of digital resources, maybe not just digital resources either, are fundamental. And the FAIR principles need to be inbuilt to every single document that we produce, standards, guidance, and toolkits, because otherwise standardization, consistency, reliability go out the window. And without that, we have no capacity to produce the kind of research that underpins the work that we do. And just to finish off, I'm not as long in the teeth as some of you in the room, but 30 years ago this year, I attended my first ever Roman Finds Group meeting, which was just down the road in Nottingham. I just finished my PhD. I was interested in getting more experience. I was in my late 20s then, so you can work out how old I am now. Topic of the day, find standards and how to implement them properly. So we know what the problems are. They are perennial. They are perhaps part of the subject, the disciplines that we're involved with. We have moved forward. We have moved forward an awfully long way, but there is still more to do. But hopefully gatherings like this, where find specialists and archivists come together, that's clearly got to be one way of proceeding in a more positive, towards a more positive future and the sunny lit uplands. Thank you very much indeed.